Welcome, everybody, to episode 1 of Straight Shoot, a wrestling podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Santi, sitting here with my other co-host, Steve. How you doing, Steve?
Not too bad, Santi. I'm excited to finally get this started after months and months of talking about it. So let's get right into it.
Right. This has been quite a few months in the making. For new listeners, this was I guess you can sort of call it a little bit of a Patreon goal. Not really on Patreon, more so on twitch.tv, where viewers got together, pooled together enough money, and here we are doing a 5-episode pilot of the Straight Shoot, a wrestling podcast show. And I wanted to bring on Steve here for a very particular reason. Steve and I used to work together. We had offices from across each other, and numerous times throughout the day, sometimes various times throughout the day, we would have full-blown arguments related to professional wrestling, WWE, and its happenings. And we figured, hey, let's bring it to the virtual world.
I find that funny, Santi, because I think we've had actually conversations with past employees of ours, and they even said at times they were scared to come into the office because our conversations were getting so heated. So definitely looking forward to seeing what everybody else thinks.
And you know what? One of those heated conversations is actually our topic of the show. We had this conversation, I would say, probably about a year ago. It got heated. People were yelling. Things were being tossed, and we're going to have that conversation here today. We are going to be talking about the Mount Rushmore of WWE, more specifically, and we'll get into the rules of what we believe are the criteria for a Mount Rushmore. But Steve, nobody knows us. Nobody knows who we are. We're a brand new wrestling podcast. A couple people know me from Twitch. A couple people know you from Twitch. But people don't know us really as wrestling fans. So I think it's only fair that we tell people a little bit about our background as wrestling fans. So I'm going to give you the floor here, Steve. Why don't you tell us how you got into wrestling, what sort of eras of wrestling you grew up with, and how you got here today?
Yeah, so how I got into wrestling is like most kids from the late 80s. Wrestling was big back then. It was Andre, it was Macho, it was Hogan, and obviously our parents back then always watching the pay-per-views. Very much like the UFC these days. You have your pay-per-view party, have the friends come over, everyone shares some money, brings the beverages, and you watch the pay-per-view.
What is pay-per-view? Can you explain what pay-per-view is?
Yes, so for everyone who's very young in this, pay-per-view, you used to have to go call your local cable company, not go online. You just have to dial, wait online, or wait on hold, talk to someone. They would put it through to your cable line, and you would get the pay-per-views. So I was about 3 years old from when I first really remember wrestling. I think the one match that really hits my mind, and not many people remember it, was a WrestleMania match. Can't remember what year it was, but it was Ric Flair versus Mr. Perfect. And I ended up getting grounded that night. I won't say what I did, but I mimicked something in the pay-per-view, and Mom still hasn't let me forget that one. So anyways, long story short,
I think every wrestling fan at some point or another has been grounded for trying some wrestling move on a younger brother or sister or cousin. I've been there.
Yeah, this one takes the cake, I guarantee it. But maybe if we get enough people asking what it was, I'll tell you in the next one. But yeah, so anyways, I fell in love with it instantly. My first house show, I was about 4. It was here in Kitchener, Ontario. The main event was Psycho Sid Vicious versus The Undertaker. We were front row. It was incredible, and I've been obsessed ever since. Been to numerous shows across the world, Australia, Canada, the US, and I guess my goal is to sooner or later get that WrestleMania. I've had tickets to 2 of them and missed out both times because of life events, but WrestleMania is the goal, man.
That's the holy grail of wrestling fans. That is
Yeah.
absolutely the holy grail of wrestling fans. Maybe not necessarily the holy grail of Canadian fans. We've had some pretty amazing events. I mean, we did have Mania 18 here, but over the last couple of years, you can make the argument that, the most recent SummerSlam, some of the amazing NXT TakeOver Canada shows have been TakeOver Toronto. Actually, that's what they were called. They weren't called TakeOver Canada. Some of those shows have just been absolutely amazing. Steve, would you like to know how I got into wrestling?
Yeah, Santi, let's get in. I just want to say you did mention one thing right there about that have been incredible. We also have had some unfortunate shows. We did have a couple of shows in BC where, Jericho had that incident, and I was actually privileged enough to be at the show where Bray Wyatt and Roman were in a tables match, and a mysterious Money in the Bank briefcase was thrown in. I'll tell you, I was front row for that one, and I will say right now, the videos online don't do it justice. What happened was amazing. So we wrestling fans in Canada are a little crazy, but we know our stuff and we're passionate. So Santi, sorry to cut you off, but
No,
let's hear.
All good, all good. I think people really should look up that incident. It's actually honestly, I put it up there with the house show clips, like CM Punk yelling at somebody, "You have a vagina." It's a classic moment that everybody needs to go check out. Every wrestler will tell you that house shows are the most fun that they'll have as a professional wrestler. But yeah, let me tell you a little bit about me. How I got into wrestling completely by accident. I was flipping channels, and I happened to run into a this is embarrassing. My first wrestling experience was a WCW Monday Night Nitro in Spanish while I lived in Colombia in 1999. So I couldn't even tell you who the announcers were. I mean, I know the Spanish announcers in WWE for a long time were Hugo Savinovich and Marcos Garcia or something along the lines of that. Anyways, so for me, wrestling was very on and off until about 2001, 2002. So you can tell that there's already a little bit of a generational gap in terms of how you got into wrestling versus when I got into wrestling. My biggest memory of wrestling is actually Brock Lesnar's debut. That is where I remember becoming a huge wrestling fan, seeing this giant cornhusker of a human being showing up on TV, destroying all of these irrelevant wrestlers, and just flat out murdering little Spike Dudley. How could you not instantly become a fan of WWE? And if you kind of fast forward a couple of months, think about the amazing feuds that I got to witness. I got to witness Hogan, Triple H. I got to witness, I guess the back end of Hogan Rock, but then Hogan Rock and No Way Out a little bit later. I got Brock and Rock. I got Undertaker and Brock. You can tell I was a huge Brock Lesnar fan. Triple H, Shawn Michaels. So naturally, 2002, which is for many people considered one of the best years in wrestling, that's when I got into it. And if that is your first year in wrestling, absolutely, you're going to become a diehard fan. No ifs, ands, or buts. How I got here today is I actually took about a 5 or 6 year hiatus from WWE after the death of Eddie Guerrero. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm done. This has happened too many times. Too many people, I was still a teenager. Too many people that I looked up to passing away. And then, of course, you had, the Chris Benoit stuff happening. So I took a giant hiatus from the WWE, and I came back at the start of the feud of The Miz versus John Cena when I heard through, believe it or not, E-News that The Rock had come back to WWE, and naturally that brought me back. And here I am, been I guess a second coming WWE fan since. So I got to witness the amazing run of CM Punk. I didn't know who CM Punk was until 2012. Can you believe that?
It doesn't matter what he's doing now. You will never forget what he did then.
No.
CM Punk was and is still, for me, that run there. Forget what he was doing with his little click that he had at the start, where he ended up shaving. Whose head was that? Was that
dude? I don't know. That's my dark ages of WWE. I didn't watch anything. So when I was introduced to CM Punk, who is now one of my favorites of all time, it was past all this stuff. I didn't get to see the fall of ECW, the rise and fall of ECW. I missed it all. I missed it all.
Pretty good storylines. Those were pretty good storylines. And it's kind of funny. You just did mention two of the greatest returns in like one sentence, with The Rock returning and hitting E News, which I remember I was in college, Lambton, Ontario, sitting in my bedroom, and my girlfriend at the time actually came in and she goes, "Did you hear that The Rock came back last night?" And I missed the Monday Night Raw. And I went and watched the rerun, which was on TSN, and I was like,
yeah.
yeah. And
That's exactly how I got back into it all. And it's interesting. I came back almost a bigger fan, I get, because you could say, a smarter fan, somebody who was in tune with the business. I started doing my research, understanding dirt sheets, understanding the difference between what's real, what's not, what's a shoot, what's a work. It almost makes wrestling less fun, to be honest.
I agree with you, but at least, like, we all know kayfabe's dead. Kayfabe's dead. But now that we have all the dirt sheets, we all know what a shoot is. We all know what, like, the fourth wall is, and all these other things that were kind of restricted to me growing up for like the 80s and the all of the 90s. Like, I was blessed as a wrestling fan being able to live the Attitude Era, from Austin winning the King of the Ring and saying, "Get that piece of trash out of my ring," to Jake Roberts. And it was the first real shoot that you got, like obviously the Marty Jannetty, Shawn Michaels barbershop. I was able to watch that. That for me as a kid, wow, is he actually got thrown through a real glass window? Like, is this real? But when you got to the Stone Cold Austin 316 says, you're like, now that you understand, that was a straight shoot, as Paul Heyman would say. And I'll tell you right now, I think that brought me into just a whole new dynamic. Like, kids at school were talking Power Rangers and X-Men on Fox 29, on Channel 28, and I'm talking wrestling.
Yo, guys, did you watch The Undertaker crucify Stephanie McMahon?
Like, people are like, your parents let you watch that? Like, I had like one friend that was allowed to watch wrestling next to me, and the kid was a complete degenerate, and pretty sure he still is, but at least I had one person to talk wrestling with, right? So it was great. It was great.
And you know what? I think that's kind of what's great about the online world. I didn't have anybody to talk wrestling with during, that ruthless aggression era. It was myself, and me trying to talk to my sister and to my parents about it, and nobody caring. But the internet became a thing. I mean, it was always a thing, really, but like became a thing. And now, we can have these types of conversations over video with like-minded people. But yeah, no, I'm glad that we were able to divulge a little bit of that information. That way, again, people have an idea of what sort of perspectives we're bringing. Like I said, I do believe that we bring very, very different perspectives. I'm not sure how much of that comes from the generational difference of when you started watching wrestling to when I started watching wrestling, but I think it's going to make for just like good discussion.
Yeah, I do. I do think the generational thing is, and from the conversations that we've had in the past, we definitely do see crossover of our generations and what we've witnessed and what we've had the ability to see. Like, luckily you now have the network, so you're able to go back, and the stuff that I'm talking about, if you've never actually seen it, you can go back and be like, holy shit, like, it was so much different. Like, ruthless aggression era, the PG era, the attitude era, the end of the 80s of the icons, we're very blessed. And granted, the network was kind of a weird thing at the start, but now, like, we get to actually understand. So the diehards that really want to go back and revisit, Savage, Hogan with the Battle of Miss Elizabeth and the Monday Night Wars and all that kind of stuff. We're very blessed with that. So we're very lucky that you and I can actually have this conversation and these future conversations to be able to really dive into it and get like a lot of feedback from everyone else and maybe continue this further. We'll see how it goes.
For sure. Absolutely. Now, we talked a little bit about, getting into wrestling when we were kids. And we do have a question from one of our listeners. This is Crossbow, who is over on our Discord. If you're interested in submitting questions, head over to the Discord. We do have a professional wrestling section on the Discord where you can submit questions like Crossbow did, who asks, which wrestler made you think you could get into being a wrestler? let me take
I'm
this
gonna
one.
let
Let
I'm
me
gonna
take
let you start with
yeah.
this one. You gave me the go ahead. I'm actually gonna let you go with this one. Go right ahead.
Dude, listen, for me, the answer it is simple. It is the jabroni beating, pie eating, trailblazing, eyebrow raising, stronger than a bear, faster than a buck, the biggest thing to hit Canada because the Toronto Maple Leafs suck. It is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
All right, you're gonna have to elaborate on that. Like, you can cut a promo almost as well as he can, but you got to tell me because he was returning as that movie superstar. So, what really drew you to him?
I love the fact that he was incredibly likable while being just the biggest dick on the planet. All right.
Reminds me of someone.
Yeah, all like the backstage interviews with the coach, with Michael Cole, and how he would just tear them apart, and they did nothing to him, and yet he's still the good guy in this scenario. And even if he's the bad guy, he's the cool bad guy. And I think the cool bad guy is something that's, I was going to say, not something that you see very often these days. We can talk Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is probably one of the few people that have done it recently, but The Rock was the quintessential, just fucking cool dude. He could cut a promo like no one. He was fantastic in the ring. He wasn't the best by any means, but as a kid, you don't care about that. You care about the showmanship. You care about the character. All right? You care about the character. And as a kid, his moves were the easiest to do. Any jabroni could do the people's elbow on his pillow. Any jabroni could rock bottom his sister. Anybody could do. He's got the simplest, most accessible moveset in the WWE. Of course, somebody like me would gravitate to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And of course, he was the it thing when I started getting into wrestling. It was him and Stone Cold. Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? I was minority. I was like, go Rocky, go, when everybody's like, of course, just popping for Stone Cold left, right, and center. Don't get me wrong, I love Stone Cold, but the Rock will always be the one that has that special place in my heart. And when he came back as Hollywood Rock, that is my favorite character in wrestling history. That is my favorite character in wrestling history. And we can dissect that if you want a little bit more.
I think we'll hold that to another one because I think you'd go off for about 40 minutes just on that one. But I think we should hold that, and if the viewers can like this, I think we might make that a best gimmick or best character episode. I think we should go there. Make a note of it.
I'm happy to discuss it a little bit more, but I will die on the hill that Hollywood Rock is the funniest, the coolest, and just the most badass character that WWE has had. Oh my, I couldn't even tell. The fact that this man was so incredibly over that he could lose to the Hurricane 2 weeks before WrestleMania. No one can do that. No one can come back from that. Stone Cold takes that loss. That ruins Stone Cold. But it
also says it. Sorry, I hate to cut you off. It also says a lot to his character. It says a lot to the respect and what he did for the business as well. That a guy that over with that much power going in to the biggest show of the year, and that he can put. Granted, Hurricane was funny, but his gimmick was horrible.
Yeah.
And he's able to put him over 2 weeks before Mania. Come on.
Dude, no one can do that. No one can do that. And it's not even that no one can do that, is no one is willing to do that. Nobody at the place where The Rock was. Imagine Hogan taking a roll-up loss to the Hurricane. Never in a million years. So, long-winded answer. It's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. What about you, Steve?
Yeah. So again, this is where our generations are going to show themselves. Growing up in Canada, obviously you would think early 90s to mid 90s, like Bret Hart was the guy. And Bret Hart was the guy for every Canadian. You cheer Bret Hart, you cheer Owen, you cheer the Bulldog, you cheer the Hart Foundation.
Oh yeah.
I was not that guy. I was Shawn all day, and I mentioned it before. That episode with the barbershop, with him putting Marty Jannetty through that window and just being that, leather jacket, pretty boy, I knew I was a smaller guy, and Shawn's not that big. What is he, 5'9", 5'10"? Like, I knew growing up, like, if there was anyone I was gonna emulate, like, come on, like, how easy is it just to super kick someone in the face, man? Come on, And he was so flashy. Like growing up, I was getting into like, late elementary school, going to junior high. This guy got all the girls. He had like the best music. Like it was just, he just had everything. He had that persona that, again, he could be heel, he could be face, but at the end of the day, his work in the ring was phenomenal. He was athletic, he was agile, he could beat the bigger guy, 5 times out of 10. For me, it was, and when he brought in Diesel, like having the big guy behind him, the enforcer, or was it the enforcer, or was it the insurance policy, or whatever they called him when he came in? Like it was just Shawn all day, and I was just like, like if I'm ever gonna go into wrestling, like this is who I want to be. So for me, short, sweet Shawn Michaels all day long.
Yeah, it's funny that there is a little bit of correlation with somewhat of the simplicity of the finisher when it comes to like a kid wanting to emulate. Like I couldn't do a moonsault, right? I couldn't do that. I would love to think that I could do an RKO. It's dangerous to try an RKO, even on a pillow. But something like a super kick, a people's elbow, it just it brings back a lot of like those childhood memories of just being on your bed and trying out these wrestling moves. And yeah, like the simplicity of these finishers that Shawn and The Rock had might have been part of the reason why you'd want to emulate them.
Yeah, exactly. And the one last thing I will add, WWE decided to go in a different direction with Shawn once they found that he was going to be their guy. And you notice if you watch like the vignettes for like Hogan and Andre and Macho Man, which really didn't exist until that mid 90s era where they actually started putting work in. And I remember when Shawn was coming back from his back surgery, he had that issue, and the vignettes when he brought in his mentor, they just were so good. Like it was just the one that just resonates with me now thinking about it is when he was doing the upside down push-ups on the wall bar, and he was upside down doing push-ups, and I was like, damn, like he's coming back and he's a savage. And then his entrance for his return, that match at Mania, and bless Vince. Vince did that run on that hook and line as well, just to make sure it was safe. And then Shawn comes out, and like it's iconic. It's in there, all their vignettes to open shows now. It's never gonna go away. So to see that kind of thing, it really made me like resonate with him. So
hey, ask Ric Flair. It's pretty easy to get taken off of those vignettes. All right, they're not always forever. They're not always forever. Steve, we've got one more question from one of our listeners, and I think that this is a good transition into an interesting topic before we really jump into the topic of the show. Now, for future episodes, I do think that we should talk a little bit more news rather than, our history as wrestling fans. I just felt that as episode 1, it made a little bit more sense to do that. But Clone asks, how do you feel about the ROH news? Now, for our listeners who may not be aware of what's happening with ROH, I'm going to read the direct statement from Ring of Honor. So, again, this is right from their Twitter account. It says, throughout the pandemic, our top priority was to keep everyone healthy and safe. And despite not producing any live shows for over 18 months, we were able to keep everyone fully contracted. Now we find ourselves at a time where we need to make changes to our business of operations and are planning a pivot for Ring of Honor with a new mission and a new strategy. The year will culminate with the final battle in December, and we will be taking our first quarter of 2022 to work internally to reimagine ROH. ROH has the most dedicated fans in the industry, and we appreciate their loyalty and patience as we re-encapsulate ROH. So, long story short, they're going to finish out the rest of the calendar year with their final pay-per-view, and they will not be putting on any more shows for the first 3 months of 2022. Yeah. Further added, everyone on the Ring of Honor roster has been released from their contracts. Released is a little bit different. This isn't them being fired. This is them being given the ability to go to any company that they so wish.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on this?
I got a lot. I'm going to try and break it down as simple as possible. Ring of Honor really has never been like in my top 3 of wrestling companies. So I do understand the direction. I do think they've been very blessed to have the opportunities to kind of break down the fourth wall and kind of work alongside the team, you and Tony Khan. And I do think there is a lot more to this. And I think we'll hear it in the next couple of months, potentially in early 2022. Personally, I feel that there's going to be a lot of crossover with other organizations. I'm not saying right now this is the end of AEW, but
ROH, not AEW.
Oh, sorry. At the end of Ring of Honor, but I am saying that I don't think it's going to be as a frequent episode type television. They might go to like a YouTube streaming or something along those lines, but they have been struggling. They do have some quite talented talent on the roster. The Briscoe brothers, EC3, those are 3 that come to mind right now, which I do see them getting opportunity in other places, possibly New Japan, possibly AEW. So I think this is a good business strategy for them, and it also gives the talent opportunity to look elsewhere. Do I think this is potentially the end of like the televised Ring of Honor? Yes. Do I think they come back stronger? No.
Got it.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be a little bit like more blunt about it. I think they're done. I really do think that they're done. I don't think that the numbers make sense. So for listeners that don't know too much about Ring of Honor, first of all, I'm with you. I'm not that into Ring of Honor, but I am privy as to how they've been managing their business throughout the pandemic. They are the only wrestling organization here in North America that has yet to do a live show in front of an audience. And that to me is ridiculous. I understand the concept of trying to keep your wrestler safe, trying to keep the audience safe. But if WWE can put on a show with 40,000+ people, you can do a small indie show with 300, 500 people. You absolutely can. I don't want to pretend to know the reason why they're not doing it. They've always said that it was for the safety of people. But listen, at the end of the day, you need to make money. You need to make money. And the fact that you haven't been bringing any ticket sales when, I mean, again, I'm not privy to the numbers of ROH, but like I can't imagine that their TV deal brings a heck of a lot of money. I can't imagine that their pay-per-views are, selling through the roof. Their most consistent source of revenue was tickets at the door. And when you haven't had tickets at the door since March 2020, and you've been able to get tickets at the door since when did AEW was doing shows with some fans in Jacksonville as early as I want to say like
the early part of this year.
Yeah, early 2021.
Yeah.
With almost mostly full capacity in most places that they go now. Yep. That is months of revenue that ROH has refused for one reason or another to bring in. Yep. Look,
and I don't want to stop you. I just want to say one other thing. If it's the safety of the wrestlers and the talent, why are these talent going to house shows or like Garage Legion, like indie shows in like small little towns and showing up and getting big pops and having matches against absolutely nobody's? It completely contradicts the statement they've just put out.
Frankly, honestly, GCW has just taken over that area that Ring of Honor held. For listeners, GCW is that crazy organization where Matt Cardona became their world champion through a bloody death match, and then they managed to get Moxley in there. Like, that is what Ring of Honor should have been doing this whole time. That's
100%.
100%. That's what Ring of Honor should have been doing this whole time. And listen, it does not take a business genius to tell you that if a company is gonna shut down for 3 months, that they're screwed. Like they are. They're probably looking at how to dissolve assets, who to sell to. What I will always have respect for Ring of Honor is the fact that they've paid their people this whole time. Even when they weren't doing shows, when they're not bringing in live ticket sales, they paid their people. But at some point, somebody's got to pay the Pied Piper. And I think
exactly. And
push has come to shove.
And you look at some of the talent that they have on there. Matt Bennett, Maria Kanellis, EC3. Those are not cheap talent. Like, just remember, these are WWE. A couple of them had very short stints in AEW, like TNA, and Dixie Carter pays heavy. So you say you're coming over to ROH, you're going to expect a similar contract. You're not going to get the big money, but you're still going to get a decent contract. So that's a lot of money they're shelling out with no return.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, it's one of those situations where I think 2 + 2 really just does equal 4. I think the math is there. It's simple. I don't think that it requires an accountant for me to tell you that their finances are probably just awful in incredible amounts of debt, and that they are most likely going to be using these 3 months and figuring out how to liquidate, who to sell licenses to, who to sell their video packages to. I will be shocked if ROH is still an independent organization by the end of Q1 2022.
Agreed.
That's where I'll leave it at. If anybody has any additional comments on this, feel free to pop those over in the wrestling section of our Discord. But Steve, it is time for our topic of the show. Are you ready?
This is gonna get heated. I tell you right now, this is gonna get heated.
All right. A whole, what are we, like 30 minutes in, we're finally getting into topic of the show. Topic of the show, Steve.
Our topic of the show today is the Mount Rushmore of WWE.
Why are you emphasizing the WWE in this, Steve?
Because if we decided to go the Mount Rushmore of wrestling, 1, this would be a 6-hour podcast. 2, we need to really decipher it to what we know best. WWE is what you and I know best. We know AEW, we know a bit about New Japan, we obviously know WCW, but what we're talking about today to start off is how WWE became what it is, who brought it to this, and who's going to take it to the next level. So we are just strictly talking WWE talent from whenever you want to go. I don't know where you're going with it. I know where I'm going with it, but we are just strictly talking WWF, which is now WWE.
Yeah, and if we want, like, if there's a smart wrestling fan watching, what we would consider WWE would be WWF post territories. So once WWF, WWW, whatever, how many W's there were no longer just considered a New York region show. When they were just the household name. So call that mid to early 80s.
Yeah.
So for those freaking out, yes, Hulk Hogan would be eligible for this list.
Yep. Andre is eligible for this list.
Yeah, you've got Bob Backlund eligible for this list. Bruno Sammartino not eligible for this list. Would he be in the list of Mount Rushmore of all of professional wrestling? I'm sure the case could be made for it. Now, Steve, still, we're tossing very vague terms. Mount Rushmore. Now, we need to qualify what's going to get somebody on the face of Mount Rushmore. For anybody who's a European listener or a Latin American listener, basically just think of Mount Rushmore as the top 4 of all time. There's 4 faces on Mount Rushmore. Before this podcast, I thought it was 5. Turns out it's 4. We need to rank these individuals based on in-ring talent, legacy that they've left behind, character, contribution to the business, and honestly, which is very important nowadays, their image, what the image they've left behind. Some people who would have been on this list have tarnished that list. Have tarnished that image. So in my head, Steve, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. What I would like to imagine is this is the Mount Rushmore that if Vince McMahon were to chisel today on the side of a mountain, he would be chiseling it based on people he could have up there today.
Yes. And for what you've just said there, automatically, Vince cannot be there. Vince is creating this Mount Rushmore for the guys that made him money and the guys that really took the business in a new direction and really grabbed the proverbial brass ring and ran with it, you know? So yeah, and the one thing I do want to clarify is contributions to the business is very much what I just stated. That could be a very vague term. Contribution to the business is one, what we know of merch sales, two, how over they were and outside of what WWE is, what World Wrestling Entertainment is, what they've done outside of there to bring people from the outside world to hang out with us lunatics, to be fair.
Yeah. And I think, like, you know, even though we've tried to bring it down to a neat definition, I still think that there's a lot of room for us to play with those definitions. That's why, you know, like, this is argumentative. You can totally put forth a wrestler that I don't agree with, but I'm definitely down to listen to your thought process as to why they deserve to be on that list. I know for a fact that I have somebody on my list that would never make yours, and I will fight tooth and nail to chisel that person myself onto the side of a mountain. But because Mount Rushmore is 4 people, Steve, I told you to bring some honorable mentions because bringing it down to 4 people was damn near impossible.
Going into the honorable mentions, there is definitely somebody on my list that you could potentially have a very strong case for to put into the top 4. And just remember, this is not top 1, 2, 3, 4. These are just the 4 faces that would be sitting there. I will say this is one of the hardest things I've had to really put together. And I am probably going to be putting my 4th on the list halfway through this discussion. I only have 3. It was too difficult, but I will say currently my honorable mentions are The Rock. He has done incredible things for the business, but at the end of the day, the business is still no longer his priority. The Rock has so many avenues, and I don't even think with the whole bloodline scenario right now and the storyline leading into Survivor Series and possibly Mania, I don't think The Rock commits to coming back to the business, and I hope he proves me wrong, but I don't think it's priority number 1.
And he has no reason to. He has no reason to.
He's done everything, and he doesn't owe anyone anything.
You want to hear something wild?
Mm-hmm.
After my spiel on how much I love doing The Rock Johnson, he's on my honorable mentions as well.
There you go. So at least, and I have a feeling you and I were thinking very similar in that. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, if you look at the Rock's career, like, it's really not that long. His accolades just are overshadowed by, honestly, at this point, like, over a dozen people in terms of what he's accomplished in terms of title belts and whatnot. But yeah, like, I think at this point he's more Dwayne Johnson than he is The Rock.
Exactly. And I think that's where we also saw us lose him when the evolution of the bull. I know it's just a tattoo, but the fact that he covered over the most iconic symbol that he had in wrestling and he's kind of moved it to, you know, a different parallel. Again, he's done it all. He doesn't owe us anything. A nice quick pop and maybe at the, you know, the Hall of Fame when he finally goes in and that kind of thing, like, you know, great. Wait, isn't he already in?
No, not yet.
Oh no, so that was the speech that he did. Never mind. My mistake. Call me out on that one. Blooper number 2. Okay, so yeah, he doesn't owe us anything, and if he comes back for one more like cheap pop, I'll take it, but I don't need to see him in the ring again.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you. Like, if but here's the thing: what's the cool thing about if he does step in the ring, it'll be because he loves it. He doesn't
Yeah.
need money. This man can literally shit more money than you and I will make in a year.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Yeah.
So if he ever steps foot back into the ring, which is possible, it really is a passion project for him, which I would respect tremendously, especially if he comes to put somebody over. But let me tell you about one of my honorable mentions here.
Yep.
All right, Steve, it's time to play the game and how you play it. All right, I've got Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley in my honorable mentions list. All right, I saw you make a little bit of a face. Let me dial this back for you. All right, we are talking about somebody who could have easily broken Ric Flair's title record, but refused to because of just the amount of respect that this man commanded for the past of wrestling, which was Ric Flair. 14-time, I believe, world champion in the industry. Out of all of the names that we are going to be putting on this list, this is the only man that is a true end-to-end lifer for WWE. He literally lives in the business. He is sleeping with the business. That is how in there he is. All right. The amount of, yes, people that he's buried, Booker T, I get it. Mania 19, that's one of his. And yes, he basically buried the entirety of WCW when they tried to make a run on the main roster with Scott Steiner and Goldberg. But then we look at the number of people that he's put over.
Yeah.
Is John Cena without that major victory at Mania 22 over Triple H? Probably. But that was really the big catalyst for the John Cena that we know today. Yeah. All right. Of course, very sensitive topic, but putting over Chris Benoit at Mania 19. All right.
Massive. That was massive because you weren't seeing any other WCW guys doing that. And especially a guy, as they would like to say in this day and age, a B-plus player like Benoit, as they refer to Bryan Danielson or Daniel Bryan in his run. And they really did that storyline well, but you really felt it was history repeating itself with the whole Benoit thing. So with what Hunter did there is number one, class, and two, to steal a line from his from his wife. It was best for business at that time.
And you mentioned another name, the Daniel Bryan, right? Like, this man almost single-handedly put over Daniel Bryan at Mania 30, I believe it was. So the contributions to the business are obviously there, from being one of the front runners and leaders during the Attitude Era, during the Monday Night Wars, DX, being pretty much the face alongside Brock Lesnar of when you think ruthless aggression, and then having those amazing bouts towards the end of his career with the likes of the Undertaker and Daniel Bryan. This man transcends several decades, and really reminds me of another individual that we'll probably talk about in terms of his contribution to the business. So that's why I've got Mr. Triple H the Game as one of my honorable mentions.
Fair enough. And leading into that, I'm going to go to basically someone who really only had a very short stint in what was and now is WWF, WWE. Andre is on my honorable mention list. Reason for that, a lot of people are going to go, Andre, like, we barely remember him. The only thing you need to remember is when Hulk Hogan slammed Andre the Giant and put Hogan into that fast track of who Hulk Hogan was and who Hulkamania was. There is absolutely 100% no Hulkamania if Andre the Giant had not yelled across the ring at that perfect moment, "Salam," and Hogan picked him up, laid him down, lifted that big tree trunk of a leg, got the 1, 2, 3. Hogan didn't know what was happening. The only two people that knew what was happening that night were Vince and Andre. Andre, just for what he did to put Hogan over, to get the people cutting promos like they do today, looking at the camera like they do today, a lot of what you see, if it wasn't for that night, it wouldn't be the same. We'd get something similar, but Andre the Giant deserves to be at least an honorable mention on this.
Yeah, I would also argue that Andre was really that first larger, I mean, physically obviously larger than life individual, but also that like larger than life persona. You know, they say that wrestlers are just their personality cranked up to 10. And I feel like Andre was one of the catalysts to get people towards that, rather than being just like these goofy versions of themselves. And then there's also the fact that, I don't know if you've seen it, but he was kind of like even like before Hogan really did it, he was like the it man when it came to being in movies for WWE, with movies like The Princess Bride.
Yep.
So he was that cultural icon that could be that crossover. He inched that door open into the mainstream for Hulk Hogan, and then Hulk Hogan just literally leg dropped his way right through that. But yep, like you said, it wouldn't have been without Andre.
Yeah, and 100% I agree with you on that. And he was also, from what we know and everything that we've learned about Andre, probably in the last 10, 15 years, again, thanks to the network, thanks to so many documentaries, he was really that first locker room leader. He was the one, he controlled everything. Everyone, like, he sat there, drank his beer, played his cards, and only certain people were really allowed in there. So he kind of had the bare bones, that concrete slab, to what we've built up to today, from what you've seen with locker room leaders from the 90s, the early 2000s, and today. So, and I'm not going to mention any names because we're definitely going to get into them. But yeah, so definitely Andre is one of the ones that you have to have there, just because I don't think the foundation that he laid, we get a lot of what we have now.
Yeah. Now, Steve, let me rubber band you, take you from one end of the spectrum of the 80s to another, to Mr. Randall Keith Orton.
Ooh,
as an
okay.
honorable mention. And who knows, maybe 10 years from now, we'll be making the argument that he should actually be on the Mount Rushmore. That man does not seem to age or frankly get injured. If you look at his track record and what he does to keep his body healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if we've got Randall Keith Orton on the roster for the next 15 years. I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of his career, he is the one that carries the record for the most world title belts. Randall Orton. All right, let's talk a little bit about him. He was one of those comeuppance during the ruthless aggression era, and and he was part of that generation that was the post Brock Lesnar lulls of WWE. Your Batista, your JBL, your John Cena, and your Randy Orton. Now, with that being said, there were a lot of people who were part of that Brock Lesnar lull, and he, along with Cena, were one of the ones that really just jumped to the stratosphere. Mm-hmm. Orton, I would argue that he is the most vile of heels that we've ever gotten. In some of the characters that he's played are just the worst human beings imaginable, is what Randy Orton is playing. And right now, he's playing one of the most lovable, most likable faces without changing his character, Steve.
At all.
At all.
At all. And it's kind of funny because it goes back to what you said about The Rock dealing with the coach, dealing with Michael Cole, dealing with Lillian Garcia in the back. Like, Randy is able to still be a face and still be a complete piece of garbage.
Yeah.
And I love it. I've only started to grow on Randy in the last, I'd say, 10 years. I was not his biggest fan in the Evolution days. Honestly, if we ever start talking about factions, Evolution probably wouldn't even rate for me. But Randy now, the Legend Killer, that vile slithering snake, the RKO, come on, like the RKO and the uniqueness of what they have done with it. And then now he's hanging out with a stoner.
It's
He's still a
great.
piece of garbage,
Yeah.
but it's comical. It's great. I love it.
Now, Steve, like at the end of his career, you might look back on Randy Orton as being the one who ends up winning the most world titles. It's very possible that he ends up taking that crown. He is not stepping foot into Hollywood. He doesn't seem to have any interest in stepping into Hollywood. So he's going to be one of those lifers. But let me tell you about a little known contribution of Randy Orton that I think is probably going to be the biggest contribution that isn't even his, but he started it. Okay? Quick question for you. When you think of the Undertaker streak, when did it start?
What did they say? Number 13?
Rhetorical question. It started with Randy Orton, WrestleMania 21. That is the first time that the WrestleMania streak mattered. That is the first time that a wrestler was going after the streak. The first time that the Undertaker was protecting the streak. It was vaguely mentioned in previous WrestleManias. Oh yeah, the Undertaker just beat A-Train and the Big Show. He is now 9-0 or whatever. But it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big deal. This was the very first time that the streak was a big deal. The first time that we got all of those fake outs of the Undertaker about to lose and him kicking out. And what does Michael Cole say? The streak is still alive. After that, every Mania Taker match is about the streak. And what do we think about when we think of Taker? The streak. And it started with Mr. Randall Keith Orton.
You know what? Great point, Santi. And honestly, I wish I had put him on my honorable mention list. I sadly didn't, but you've made some really valid points to have him there. So I will definitely have his name on there for that for sure.
Hey, you know what? We keep doing this in 10 years. He might just be on our list.
100%. Okay, so I'm gonna go. I've got 2 more left, and I actually have 3 more left. I'm going to skip one because I might get crucified for it. So I'm gonna go with the same generation, the crew that came out of FCW back in the day, that Randy Orton, that John Cena, the Dave Batista.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Dave Batista. Okay, who is this?
Brock Lesnar.
Brock
Lesnar, for me, it's like you don't remember WWE without Brock. It doesn't matter when he was in WCW, or in UFC, or when he was in WWE, or when he was just gone. Like, for some reason, Brock is never gone. It's like he's always there. You think of key components of wrestling and storylines, and it's Brock. And it just keeps going and keeps going. And like you said, a man who doesn't seem to age. Yes, okay, he looks a little older with his lumberjack gimmick right now, but really, like, he's still as strong of an athlete as he is. He's not botching matches, and he's putting on good shows and carrying storylines. And I don't need to talk too much about him. He's been around. He was like the next big thing, and he became the big thing. So honestly, end of the day, Brock Lesnar has to be an honorable mention on this one.
Yeah, I would. What was crazy, Steve, if we were to go back and look at some of the people that Brock Lesnar has beaten, it's wild. All right. Yeah. And remember when we were talking and I was telling you about how I got into wrestling and Brock Lesnar was just sort of a thing that just became a household thing? Here's some of the memories that I have. Him destroying Hulk Hogan and wiping his blood on his chest.
Love that.
That same year, he beat The Rock. That same year, he beat The Undertaker. And then won the Rumble, and then won the main event of Mania. Like, that is insane. Yep. The man that made Stone Cold Steve Austin take his ball and go home because he refused to put over Brock Lesnar. We all know now that Stone Cold regrets that. But could you imagine if he would have had a Stone Cold defeat, like a Stone Cold victory in that series of 2002 just gauntlets?
It changes the business. I think if that happens, it changes the business. I still think Austin takes his ball and goes home. Even if he does the match, I don't think he comes back for a while. I think he takes that hiatus. I think it's very difficult because I don't think Cena begins his run to the skies that he and the limits or the astronomical heights that he did, because then you're looking at Lesnar just being the face of the business. If you beat Austin clean on a Monday Night Raw and it's not promoted, bro, no.
Yeah.
Sorry. Agreed. Also that the chain match against Taker, still one of those ones that pops in my mind. And just remember, we can talk about who he's beaten, but let's also talk about quickly who he's put over. Just remember, not many people have beaten Brock Lesnar clean.
It's a draw. It's an event.
Yeah,
when somebody does.
Eddie Guerrero at Vengeance for the title. Okay, it wasn't that clean. There was a title used, but
it was Eddie Guerrero clean.
Yeah, it was Eddie Guerrero clean, and honestly, still one of my favorite matches of all time. And obviously, him working alongside Rey. Nobody really in a real life is gonna think Brock Lesnar is gonna lose to Rey Mysterio, and he worked Rey. The botch against Angle, the shooting star press, which thank God he's never done that again. But again, these are just iconic images that I'm saying the reason I put him here is because you don't remember wrestling without Brock Lesnar.
You know what Brock Lesnar is? You know those like 1930s circus that have like the bearded woman, the man with 10 fingers in one hand. Brock Lesnar is the King Kong of that circus. He is the draw. People come for Brock Lesnar. Yes, Lesnar takes these hiatuses. He can, because he just can. And anytime he comes back, people are going to put money to watch Brock Lesnar, because Brock Lesnar is frankly probably one of the best workers on the planet. He could work with a little guy, medium-sized guy, huge guy, you name it. Like, the man basically had a 5-star bout with the Big Show. Like, who can do that?
Come on, man. He had a feud with a kid with one leg.
I forgot about that.
Come on, man.
I forgot about that.
He had a feud with Zach Gowen. Come on, like, let's be real. Brock Lesnar can work anyone, and he'll give a receipt now and again as well. Like, look what he did to Braun live on television.
Mm-hmm.
He pretty much knocked Braun out on his feet, but he still was able to work the show, and there was no heat at the end of it. So, yeah, the only heat I think I've ever really heard him have is with Jericho.
Right, yep.
Where he busted Randy open with the elbows.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because Brock Lesnar does not really fit the mold of like anybody else that's in the company. Like, everybody else is a draw because of their amazing character, their amazing work. Brock Lesnar is a draw in the sense like that he is the final boss in a video game.
Yes.
He is the final boss. You want to put somebody over and make them a legend in WWE? You got to go through Brock Lesnar nowadays. All right.
And look what it's done for Roman. Look what it's done for Roman.
Seth.
Like, yeah, Seth. Roman. I can't remember. There was someone else recently. It'll come back to me. Anyways, but like two guys that still came out of NXT. Roman, let's just say Roman has never really been over. He's been the guy, but now Roman is over as a true dog of a heel.
And also, sorry, go on.
And don't you can't lie to me. You love Roman right now. I don't like Roman as a performer. I love Roman's gimmick. So I've never cheered for Roman in my life. I got an Acknowledge Me t-shirt. I'll spend my money on his gear right now just because he's doing good work.
How have we talked Brock Lesnar and not talked about the ending of the streak?
Because I don't want to talk about the ending of the streak.
But I mean, like, look, bad example here, but that is wrestling's 9/11. You know where you were at that moment in time when the Undertaker streak ended. All right. If you are too young to remember it, you are going to go back to watch what happened. If you aren't born yet, and 10 years from now, when you're old enough, you are going to go back and watch that clip of Lesnar beating The Undertaker. We want to
Tell
talk.
me you thought it was a botch.
I think everybody thought it was a botch because I don't think we heard a bell.
No, there was no bell,
Exactly.
there was no music, and I remember. I don't know if you watched the wrestling show out of the UK. I can't remember what it's called. I'll figure it out. But Paul Heyman was on there and doing a live event talking about it.
Oh, WCPW.
WCPW, and he was talking to the crowd, and he flipped his chair around and he got into his Paul Heyman gimmick, and he goes, "Does Brock Lesnar do what Brock Lesnar wants to do?" And he went into that whole thing, and you're like, that's what we were all thinking in that moment. Did Lesnar lay his shoulders down purposely? Did he actually force Taker not able to get kicked out? Did the backstage guys not know what to do? Is Vince up screaming and about to do his, Billy walk all the way out to the ring and be like,
tear another quad?
And so we all thought it was a botch, and he goes down in history as the guy was it a shoot? Was it a botch? Was it a shoot? Did Lesnar do what he wanted to do? Did he want his name etched in proverbial stone forever because he's the one who ended the streak?
Yeah. I mean, we talk about those everlasting moments, right? And that's one of those. Well, Steve, you took my last honorable mention. I think we could probably jump into the actual Mount Rushmore.
Give me one more. I have one more that I do want to mention. And just because of contributions to the business and contribution to the biggest shoot in wrestling history. And I'm talking about the Montreal Screwjob. I'm talking about Shawn Michaels. And I am talking about probably one of the best in-ring performers right now. Like I say right now, or of all time, I say, imagine if Shawn Michaels was at the caliber that he was at in the early 90s to come out and perform against Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins.
Wait, I'm confused. Is your person here Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart?
No, it's Shawn Michaels.
It's Shawn, okay.
It's Shawn. So imagine if Shawn was able to come out and have those matches. They would be, I don't give 5-star, and they would be pretty damn close. Shawn is a staple in the business. What he's doing behind the scenes with NXT right now is incredible. What he did in his return, the feud with Hunter, the feud with Taker, two of my favorite matches of all time. The two matches against Taker at Mania, the ending of an era, like those were, I have to mention Shawn. He was who got me really into, watching wrestling and watching the art and the storytelling. If I couldn't mention Shawn, I would feel horrible. So Shawn definitely deserves to be in the honorable mention list.
It's funny that you mentioned we'll jump away from this real quick, but it's just one of those memories that's just kind of locked in there for me. You mentioned the end of an era match, the Taker versus Triple H with Shawn Michaels as special guest referee. I still remember how epic here's how epic that match was. It was so epic that Shawn had an entrance, Triple H had his entrance, Undertaker had his entrance, and then the Hell in a Cell, the actual cell itself, had an entrance. They played music. I can't remember what band it was, but they were playing music as the cell came down. It was just so epic. I'm pretty sure just entrances were like 35 minutes between those 4 entrances. But Steve, it's time for the actual Mount Rushmore. And I want to get this started off with probably a couple obbies that we probably both have. But before we do that, I'm just going to flat out ask you 2 questions. Do you have Ric Flair on your list?
No, I do not have Ric Flair on my list.
Do you have Hulk Hogan on your list?
No, I do not have Hulk Hogan on my list. And as we discussed at the start of the show, unfortunately, due to the recent events, I think they would be, no pun intended, stone cold shoo-ins. But due to recent events and how we are critiquing. The legacy, unfortunately, has a very, very large black spot on it for. So no, I do not have Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan on the list. As much as it hurts to say that they're not there, um, because of everything, recent events, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, they couldn't be there for me.
Yeah, and I was asking because I don't either. And it is for that same reason. Now, I want to clarify that Steve and I are the farthest things from like little snowflakes that get insulted over everything. But we're smart people, and we recognize that there are certain individuals who have said certain things or done certain things in their life that just cannot be commemorated. They just can't. And Ric Flair, with what's come about during the flight, what was it called? The Flight from Hell? I can't remember
The Flight from Hell, the Dark Side of the Ring production. Unfortunately, like we just can't. There's too many unknowns for that to be there, and I know there's a big split on this. Like real wrestling fans, like ourselves, like you said, we're not snowflakes. Real wrestling fans like us want these two to be there, and I do think they should be there. But real wrestling fans are going to be split down the middle, being like, you know what, like you can't. You can't.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like, I feel like a real wrestling fan is somebody that doesn't want to gatekeep the product. And what I mean by that, like a real wrestling fan shouldn't try to prevent others from getting into the business and getting into the fandom of it. So with that being said, somebody like me that is trying to get people into wrestling, that's always preaching about how great and what a great pastime it is. If they were to if a 10-year-old kid was to ask me about like what wrestlers he should look up, I would tell him, look up the matches of Hulk Hogan, look up the matches of Ric Flair. Yes. Would I evangelize them as the people that he should look up to? No, I wouldn't.
No,
I absolutely wouldn't. And that kind of goes with the shady legacy that they're going to leave behind, even though their body of work is amazing. Yes. Right? You know whose body of work is amazing? Benoit. Would anyone in their right mind ever say anything positive about that piece of trash aside from his body of work? No, absolutely not. Obviously, that is like the most extreme example of destroying your legacy. Nonetheless, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan have walked in that path that kind of does tarnish their legacy enough to the point where their body of work and their contribution is hard to celebrate.
Yeah, in wrestling terms and in very simple terms, to not kind of draw this out, Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, by their actions outside of the business, they buried themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. They buried themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no coming back from it. So let's really get into it. I'm gonna let you take the lead on the first one.
Sure.
So feel free. I do have a feeling our top two might be quite similar, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go in any particular order. I think all of these people, like I'm just kind of treating them as equal. So this isn't a ranking of any shape or form. I actually just figured, hey, let's just get started with one that I know is on both of our lists, The Undertaker. And if he's not on this list, I need you to hang up on this call right now.
No, actually, Taker was the first name I wrote down.
It's the easiest one to put down. Put down.
He go ahead. Sorry, you can go right into this, and
sure.
I will jump in when I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about somebody that has now crossed, what is it, the 80s, 90s, the aughts, the teens, and the 2020s. What is it, like 4 or 5 decades that he's actually wrestled in? I know I'm getting that wrong and a little bit of hyperbole there, but point still stands. Like the man was in the golden age, was in the trash age of the early 90s, Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, PG era, the internet era, whatever you want to call it. He's been through it all. And through all of those eras and all of those years, he is this grander than life gimmick. And I want to use the word gimmick here for a second because he is the greatest gimmick of all time.
Yes.
He proved that gimmicks work early on when everyone was a gimmick. And he proved that gimmicks can work in an era when WWE was obsessed with killing gimmicks, a la Bray Wyatt and The Fiend. All right? This is, I mean, it's kind of a cheesy pun. He is unkillable when it comes to his gimmick. That is a gimmick that will transcend space and time. Could anybody else take that mantle? No, absolutely not. The man behind the cap, Mark Calloway, that is his and his alone to carry.
Yeah, and to piggyback that, the fact that he was able to keep character and keep the business and his personal life separated for all those years.
I don't know anything about the man.
Up until 2 years ago,
Yeah.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
Like, we got to see the docs, which I'm so glad he did open the door, because I do think us real wrestling fans really wanted to see, like, who's Mark Calloway? We know who the Undertaker is. And some of the stuff we see about him, like, my favorite clip, and it shows how the old school business never died with him, and I think that's why Vince is so reliant on him, is that gimmick, or that the 24, the 24 doc, where they're checking into the hotel, and Taker's there, and he's facing Roman at Mania, and Roman walks right up next to him. Tell me in the 90s that's happening.
Mm-mm.
No, wrestling fans would be like, why are these guys standing next to each other and not beating the crap out of each other? And then Calloway turns around, looks at Roman. Can you not stay in character for 5 minutes? And like, that just speaks to how much respect he has for the business, how much that character meant. And I think that's why, even towards the end, some of those matches were so bad. I think he was still looking for that grandiose farewell, and unfortunately he had it in the COVID times. But let's be real, everything about that Boneyard match screamed Taker.
That was awesome.
In every sense. I think I actually text you after that match and said that was perfect. It was perfect, and it just speaks to Taker. Like, it speaks to everything he has accomplished in this business. And the best part about Taker for me is he didn't have to have the title.
Yeah, well, he was so I have it here in my notes. He is the main event, right?
Yes.
We talked a little bit about Lesnar being that final boss. The Undertaker was the final boss for 30 years. He was the final boss, right? We talk about Lesnar putting over Roman. Did Roman become Roman when he beat Lesnar or when he beat Taker? I would argue right? So, like, Lesnar has that same aura. Excuse me, the Undertaker has that same aura of final boss status. But let's break it down. So, body of work, I mean, amazing. Like, he's got some of the greatest matches of all time. One of the few 5-star matches with Shawn Michaels, Hell in a Cell, Bad Blood 1998. Arguably 2 more 5-star matches in back-to-back Manias with Shawn. He's got a legacy of amazing matches post Randy Orton, I should say, throughout his streak. The streak itself is monumental and iconic. Legacy to the business, yeah. Did he extend the business beyond outside of wrestling? No. But did he tarnish it? No, never once.
Is number one.
Right?
It's always been number one, and he will take it to the grave that it's number one. And even, like, again, Michelle McCool, like, his wife, has spoken to that. Like, she goes, our family's our family's number one, but so is the business. Mm-hmm. And we all understand that. And if Vince calls tomorrow, he's showing up to work.
Yeah.
Because so no, I agree. Body of work. And just remember, this was a man near 7 feet tall, doing swan dives over the top rope outside of the ring, and he was supposed to be the guy that moves slow, but in a second he could just turn it on, and you're like, whoa, where did this come from, and how is a man this big doing this? And I think that opened the door for the likes of, Drew McIntyre, Keith Lee, Karrion Kross. Like, these are some big as well, and they're moving like Taker. And I don't think you see that, because when was the last time you saw Hogan, who's what, 6'5", 6'6", do a swan dive?
Never.
He could barely do a leg drop when he was fit.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's just, his work wasn't great, but I'm just saying Taker's work was excellent.
All right, Steve. Quick question about Taker for you on the spot. So if you need time to think of one, you let me know because I've got one. What is your favorite Taker match that does not include Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Brock Lesnar?
Do you have one?
I have a couple, but I want to just really do a huge shout out to the Undertaker, American Badass Undertaker, believe it or not, against Jeff Hardy in a ladder match for the WWE title. The fact that Undertaker agreed to be in a ladder match is, first of all, out of this world. And the fact that it was so amazing, so amazing. Kids, children, go back and watch Jeff Hardy versus the Undertaker on free television in a ladder match on a Monday Night Raw.
Incredible match. And I will piggyback that. Now I need you to ask the question again because I didn't quite hear the second part. What were the matches I have to exclude?
Yeah, so what is your favorite Taker match that does not include Brock Lesnar, Triple H, or Shawn Michaels?
Easy, because it should be the one that you sit there and be like, damn, I should have put that one in there as well. It is Hell in a Cell, Undertaker, Mick Foley. What happened in that match? And granted, Mick carried that match. Taker really, you don't really remember a lot except for the throw.
Yeah.
The top. But let's be real. Again, this speaks to Mark Calloway staying in character. Like, Mick's, like, badly hurt.
He's dead, man. He's dead.
He's badly hurt. And Undertaker still carried Mick near the end of that to get the match finished and still be that one match that will go down as the WTF of wrestling. Like that was your first death match.
Yeah,
let's
really?
be real. That was your first death match.
Yeah. It's actually true. It's actually true. All right. Well, Steve, I don't think that we need to make any more arguments for The Undertaker. I think that's the easiest one.
Taker, check.
Yeah. I'm glad that we agree on that one. I'm going to let you take the reins on this next one here. Who do you got?
Well, I'm pretty sure that you have this one on your list as well. And if you don't, I'm going to open up a can of whoop ass on you. And it is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Please tell me he's on your list.
I have Jinder Mahal in that spot.
Turn off. Guys,
I just kidding. Yes, of course I have Stone Cold Steve Austin in there. Yes.
Yeah, honestly, and this is a unique one, Santi, because his run really was like 6-7 years.
Wasn't that long? Yeah.
It was a short run, but he changed the business. He was the first person you can really say through a true shoot. He changed the dynamic. If without Austin, there's no Attitude Era.
No, yeah.
There is no Mr. McMahon.
Yep.
There is no Rock, I don't believe.
Yeah, there's no foil, right? There's no foil to the Rock, and the Rock works best when he has a foil, and that was Austin.
And the final one is, I don't think we get the American Badass. Because when Taker went away, for that short period, after I think it was the Buried Alive match that he lost, and he went away, and he had to reinvent his character. And what Austin was doing was changing the business, and it speaks to Austin, it speaks to Taker again, as two generals in the locker room, being able to come back and really change the entire business and mainstream professional wrestling. We have sayings in our everyday life that if it wasn't, for Stone Cold, they'd never exist.
Yeah.
What was there, but what Stone Cold made what?
Yeah.
Can of whoop ass. Like the Austin. Tell me, in the last year, have you seen an Austin 316 t-shirt? Because I know you have.
Always.
And they still, to this day, are one of the most common shirts next to Fruity Pebbles over there that you see walking around. But Austin, granted, his work wasn't great, but he was very much like what we spoke to Shawn and Rock his moves were easy to maneuver. Like, did you ever win those big stuffies at Wonderland or the fair there, the big gorilla? You could do a Luthez press on them, and stun them and all that kind of stuff. I'm a smaller guy, so it was easier for me. But those moves were easy. You could walk around like bobbing your head at someone, drinking a beer, middle fingers, telling your teacher to kiss your ass, that kind of thing. Like, if it wasn't Austin and doing what he was doing in the 90s, man, I don't think I don't think I would have kept up with it, man. So
yeah, no, I hear you, and I'll add a couple of things there. So I mean, I'm trying to rack my brain around this. I cannot think of a superstar that has had more consistent, massive pops than Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like, Steve Austin was the thing, and the thing that everyone liked. It's very rare to find a WWE face that is universally liked by kids all the way up to adults. And Stone Cold Steve Austin was that guy. Very, very, very rarely do we find that superstar that bridges that gap across all ages. And sometimes they do, and they don't last the entire time. Austin's run after King of the Ring was maybe not King of the Ring, maybe let's say post Mania versus Bret Hart, when he passed out and refused to give up. That's probably the catalyst of like the badass, the rattlesnake. Yep. Right? Yep. This man literally prevented WCW from winning. Yeah. Like, he was the ratings. He was absolutely the ratings in a time where ratings was everything. And what's funny, Steve, is that it seems like we're coming back into the era of ratings are everything. So who is going to bring out that Stone Cold Steve Austin that's going to be the ratings magnet? I don't know.
I don't know either. I have two in mind, and maybe that's something we can talk about another time. But what you said about being the most likable, I have a very funny, quick little ad lib into that. My mom said to me when I was a kid, if there's anyone I would ever leave your dad for, it is Stone Cold Steve Austin. And my dad looked up and just shook his head, and my mom goes, I'm not joking. And I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And honestly, Stone Cold, it's even now, he can come out and do a stupid gimmick with the New Day, and the pop is still louder. People are going to argue this. I still think any Austin pop is bigger than Edge at the Rumble and The Rock's return to be the host of Mania. If you want to argue with me, put it in the Discord. I will talk to the comment and come at me with it. But Austin's pops will not
just on a Monday Night Raw.
On a Monday
Night Raw. It's true. Yeah. Like, it's insane. Like, you hear that glass shatter, and I have not seen it today where everyone stands up. Yeah. Everyone stood up and cheered and got loud when you heard the glass shatter. I haven't heard anyone have that, any sort of pop. Maybe the closest I've ever seen everyone in the building standing up for the same thing was Hulk Hogan hulking up on The Rock at Mania 18. That might be the only time I've ever seen anything as close to everyone on their feet just losing their absolute minds over a single character. But Austin did that on a Sunday Night Heat.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, turn that back around. The closest thing I've seen recently is Punk's return, and that was it. Yeah. And even then, if you think of when Austin came out in that three-way thing at Mania with Shawn and Mick, that was still a better pop.
Oh yeah,
because it's the business. Austin, for me, still to this day will forever be the face of the business.
Interesting. All right, we ready to move on?
Oh, I think it's about to get interesting.
I don't think it's going to get that interesting yet. So,
okay,
you had him as one of your honorable mentions, and I'm going to be fighting to have him on the face here. I've got the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels as part of the Mount Rushmore. So let me talk a little bit about Shawn Michaels. Very similar to the Undertaker, this man did not need the title. He was the main event. He wasn't final boss status. He was just this different kind of, like, everyone could just sort of get behind this dude. He was, you know what? If Taker and Lesnar are the final boss, Shawn Michaels is the playable character. He is the one that you want to beat the final boss. All right. So let's talk about body of work. I'm done. That's it. That's all I had to say. Body of work for Shawn Michaels. That's it. It's the best body of work in the history of the business. There is nobody who has the caliber of matches that he has. All right. Maybe in 10 years, we can talk Kenny Omega. Maybe. But,
big shout.
But what Kenny Omega doesn't have, yes, Kenny Omega has amazing matches, but he doesn't have them at the stages that Shawn Michaels did. Right? He hasn't had them with the names that Shawn Michaels did. Okay? So the body of work that Shawn Michaels has left behind for the business, amazing matches with The Undertaker, amazing matches with Triple H, amazing matches with Chris Jericho. All right? Like, just the Bible that this man has left behind, this tome of amazing matches, I don't think is matched by anyone in the business, and it won't be matched for quite some time. We can talk about legacy. This is where it can be a little bit iffy because it's a tale of two halves. The first half, pre-back injury, there is no doubt that this man is a toxic piece of trash. Everyone will tell you that Shawn Michaels was a snake and just the most unlikable, most narcissistic, selfish person in the business.
Shawn Michaels will tell you that.
Yeah, that is no secret. Had he been that person his whole career, wouldn't have made it on this list. But the fact that this man changed his life around, you know, we can meme about how he became a born again Christian or all of this, but he walked the walk, right? He said, I am changing my life. I am getting off of drugs. I am seeking counseling. I am trying to be a better person. And we saw all of that throughout his entire run post 2001. And that run, what's crazy, Steve, he had so many main events, so many amazing matches, Mania main events, countless pay-per-view main events, held one world title. Would most people know that? No, because it felt like he was always carrying a world title. And that world title run that he had, 2 months, from Survivor Series to Armageddon. He lost it to Triple H, who just beat everyone. But do you think of Shawn Michaels as that guy that, like, never won the? No, he almost feels like he always carried the world title because he was that important, no matter what storyline he was in. If he was like, this man made a match against God, where his tag team partner was God. All right, a Backlash, entertaining. This man had an entertaining match with 65-year-old Vince McMahon. He could carry anybody through an amazing 5-star bout. So we're going back to the body of work. I don't want to go back to body of work because we already know that's amazing. But legacy, matches he's left behind, body of work, this man is going to be remembered forever. Outside of the business, again, very similar to Taker, really never took that step out. Had he continued to be his douchey self from the 90s, he might have actually tarnished the business and the rep. It's almost a blessing that this man had to retire because of his back injury.
He almost did tarnish the business because he was one of the first ones to cross over into the X-rated stuff.
Yeah.
He did the Play Dude cover, and that was like, what? Like, what's going on? I thought WWF was wrestling. What is this guy coming over here and pretty much doing porn for, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of those ones where you're like, okay, like, this could go a lot of directions, because name other wrestlers, and I don't want to get into this depending on who's listening, but other wrestlers that have moved into that or done that, where are they now?
No,
I can think of one other one who I'm not going to mention that is still within the business. I get what you're saying, but WWE for a while did have that relationship with Playboy where they did all the cover shoots for they had like the cover models. So I don't think it's like that wild.
I think I think it's more wild that it was a guy, and it was also a guy that was at the top of his game, at the top of the food chain. Where if a kid, was getting into wrestling, the first name you see back in 1996, 1997 is Shawn Michaels, and to have that as part of his resume at that time, I can see it damaging the business. Like I said, blessing in disguise, that back injury that forced him to retire prevented him from continuing on that toxic path, so that he was able to come back at SummerSlam 2002. One of my favorite matches of all time against Triple H, and have just
was that the street fight or the unsanctioned fight?
Yeah, unsanctioned fight, SummerSlam 2002. It's one of my favorite matches of all time, which with that ends in movie style with Triple H reparalyzing Shawn Michaels with a sledgehammer to the back. But yeah, I think body of work is there. Legacy that he's left behind for the business is there. I mean, accomplishments are obviously there. And we can talk about here. Hypothetical question. Maybe don't even answer this. Who do you think is more of a world champion, Shawn Michaels or Randy Orton? I think Shawn Michaels, even though Randy Orton has had more title reigns. But that's because Shawn Michaels never needed the title. Who is more of a champion in WWE, The Undertaker or Randy Orton? Same answer. These are two guys that have just transcended the need to have a title and the need to always win.
Yeah.
These two guys, Shawn Michaels, probably more so than The Undertaker, came out on top in losses. I'm going to give you an example. When he lost, when he was eliminated by Batista at the Royal Rumble, and he was trying so hard to win it just to go fight Taker that second time, the way he was eliminated, just grabbing for the ropes, falling. This man was the main character in a loss.
No, agreed.
So
agreed.
That's what I mean by these people didn't need the wins. They didn't need the titles. They transcend that because they're so much bigger than that. And Shawn Michaels is one of those.
Yeah, I honestly, I do agree with you. Shawn is forever Mr. WrestleMania, and forever his body of work is second to none.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I was mentioning him in my honorables, I wish we got Shawn Michaels, the performer Shawn Michaels, in today. I would absolutely pay astronomical amounts of money to see Shawn versus AJ. Like, oh my God, what that match could be. You know what I mean? So I agree. Everything that you said, everything that I mentioned in the honorable mentions, Shawn Michaels absolutely deserves at some point to be close to the top four. Unfortunately, he's not there for me, and I'm going to turn it around on you and take one of your honorables, and I am putting in the King of Kings, the game, Triple H.
Interesting. All right.
And let me speak to this, because at first, my introduction to Triple H was Hunter Hearst Helmsley at the CNE in an outdoor show back in the early 90s. I went to a show, and I got to see him, and I was like, this guy, in my mind back then, was just a worker. Honestly, I just never saw anything special. But body of work, he's not a performer, like he's not a high flyer, but he's clean in everything he does.
He's one of the best in-ring storytellers.
Absolutely. He can sell. Like, come on, let's talk about that what was it, the atomic drop that he took, and he just stood there for 5 minutes, and Shawn's trying to blow him over from the corner.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, great. I loved it. Great. And just awesome. But his in-ring ability, his skill in the ring, his power, his movement, his way to just tell a story is incredible.
Yeah, let me jump in on that storytelling that doesn't even require like wrestling. Just think about how epic he makes it when he just grabs a sledgehammer. It's a moment, right? Yeah. Anyone else grabs a sledgehammer, or any sort of weapon, who cares? But Triple H, with his amazing in-ring storytelling and body language, which I you could argue might be the best out there, like in terms of psychological in-ring storytelling, I think Triple H may have the case to be the best of all time. That's why they call him the cerebral assassin. Just the way he grabs that sledgehammer, just literally like, you're about to end this man's life.
To keep it as PG rated with this, it is a part of him. Like, you think of the Dudleys, you think of tables, you think of the Hardys, you think of ladders, you think of Edge and Christians, you think of tables, you think of Eddie Guerrero, you think a belt is about to get thrown somewhere. You think of Triple H, it is that sledgehammer. And even Cody Rhodes had to steal the gimmick to put AEW over. So to say that, because what happened when Cody pulled out the sledgehammer? What did you think?
Yeah,
you're a Walmart version of Triple H.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I get it. Cool. Like, you're trying to. This is because you weren't paying an homage. You were trying to ridicule, and it made you look dumb. All right, because Triple H looks cool with it. You look like a child wielding a toy, Cody.
Come on, tell me, when you actually have a sledgehammer in your hands, do you not think that you look like Triple H? I do. Yeah. When I'm at work and I'm doing some stuff at work, I'm working in the backyard. I have a sledgehammer on one side and an axe on the other. Do I not pick it up and be like, yeah, I could do some Triple H shit right now. Like, let's go. You know what I mean? So no, his body of work, his way to tell the story, and I just need to say it now. Yes, okay. Is he sleeping with the boss's daughter? Whatever. But who does Vince respect more? Any of these guys that he's brought in, Paul Heyman, Eric Bischoff, Bruce Pritchard,
his own son,
his own son. He respects Hunter so much more because he's the guy that stays late. He goes over tape. He wants to learn the business. That man knows how to do everything in that business like Vince does, if not potentially at this day and age better, and it proves it in NXT.
Yeah. We're going to be talking Triple H for the next 40 years.
Yeah,
100%. We might not be talking these other guys in the next 40 years because there might be new people that overtake them. But Triple H is going to be, CFO, CEO, whatever, for the next 40 years, for the rest of his life, whatever he's got left. Triple H is going to be that name that is going to be known for darn near a century in wrestling, however long he lasts in this world.
Yeah, 100%. As long as his heart holds up.
Yeah. All right. Now, Steve, we're down to our last ones. All right. Who do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
I'm going to surprise you, so you can go first.
All right, I will go first. All right, my friends. Somebody's here. All right. I hear in the background some trumpets that might even be sounding a little bit. It's our boy, the champ, is here. John Cena is unequivocally a part of the Mount Rushmore of WWE. No debate, no ifs, ands, or buts. The man has the most amount of haters out there and the most amount of fans all at the same time. Let's go, Cena. Cena sucks. All right. But at the end of the day, Let's Go Cena is just as valuable and just as money making as a Cena sucks. All right. Body of work. I mean, we can talk titles. This man had the Ric Flair stuff happened a couple months earlier. He probably would have been the 17-time champion at SummerSlam, so that WWE could sweep Ric Flair under the rug. I think it's inevitable that WWE is gonna just want John Cena to be a 17-time world champion. Okay, in terms of matches, Big Match John, Steve. There's a reason they call him Big Match John. Sure, he's got a very safe move pool, the five moves of doom, whatever they call them. But he has some of the greatest matches post Brock Lesnar. He has a barn burner with Triple H Mania 22. Follows it up with a barn burner with Shawn Michaels at Mania 23. Couple months later, an absolute slobber knocker and probably one of the most iconic. If you had to make a list of 50 most iconic matches, John Cena is going to be in a couple of them. And one of those is One Night Stand versus Rob Van Dam at ECW. Okay. His rivalries, let's talk about them. This man is one of the few characters in the business that could honestly say he's got several arch nemesis. He's got The Rock. He's got Randall Keith Orton. He's got Edge. All right. This man has feuded with some of the most important faces in the wrestling business, and those faces most likely owe a lot of their superstardom to their amazing feuds with John Cena. Nay, lest we forget somebody who is huge on AEW who may not have gotten as huge if Cena weren't willing to put him over. CM Punk. We talked about some individuals who are willing to put people. We talked about The Rock putting over Hurricane. Obviously, I am not comparing CM Punk to Hurricane, but I am comparing Cena and Rock being in a situation where they had no reason to put these little guys over. And yet Cena did. And it was one of the greatest moments and matches of all time. Legacy, dude, outside of the business, probably the greatest of any superstar of all time. All right. No jokes aside, the man has managed to grow in Hollywood without stepping away from wrestling. It's only now where he's truly becoming a Hollywood superstar where he's having to fully step away from the business. But he worked up to that while being pretty much a full-timer in WWE. That is not something that The Rock can say. The Rock stepped away fully away from the business to do shit movies until he finally hit it big. Cena work WWE 350 days a week while doing The Marine, doing Trainwreck, and eventually just kind of moving his way up to bigger and bigger roles to now where he's a marquee name in Hollywood. When you think Dwayne Johnson, you don't think wrestling. When you think John Cena, you think wrestling, even though he's bigger outside of wrestling than he is in wrestling nowadays. To Make-A-Wish Foundation, I mean, like, what better thing could a celebrity do to be a good human being than to grant a dying child their wish? This man has granted the most wishes in the history of anybody that has granted a wish for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So outside legacy, outside of the sport, and what this man has done for the business, and how representable he can be for a brand new child getting into wrestling is bar none the highest out of anybody in the history of professional wrestling. I'm going to take a pause here because I've been talking a lot. I'll let you jump in here.
Okay. Obviously by the video of while you were speaking, there's going to be a lot of images clipped of me rolling my eyes and yawning and disagreeing. So I'm going to tell you first the points that I disagree with. First off, and it's the biggest one, it has nothing to do with the charitable work. Don't get me wrong. Please don't crucify me, everyone online, about Cena being a Make-A-Wish Foundation person. Amazing contributions, over 600 contributions to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. But it is also his Achilles heel, why, in a way, I feel he does not deserve to be on the Mount Rushmore. Reason being, John Cena never went heel. This shirt, and it's the reason I bought this shirt, is the closest we got to John Cena as a heel. And it was still hustle, loyalty, respect, just like Hulk Hogan, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and all that other garbage from back in the 80s that wasn't even over then. John Cena going heel, and we are seeing it now with Roman. if John Cena had gone heel, he would have been number 3 on my list. Easily. Because he would have broadened his spectrum as an in-ring performer, because I truly believe he has more in his arsenal, and we saw it in that CM Punk match where he was doing Hurricane Ranas and all these other types of moves that he kept out of his moveset. The 7 moves of doom, honestly, for me, he doesn't deserve to be there because he is a horrible in-ring performer. At the end of the day, he can still tell a story and he can still carry a match, but moveset and skill in the ring, it's not even close to half to even 80% of everyone we spoke to on this list. Okay,
right. Sure. Now, with that, I'm gonna clap back. So I mean, Cena not going heel. I know that's a big gripe for many wrestling fans. I would argue that Cena was both the biggest face and the biggest heel at the same time. I started it with my initial conversation of the "Let's go Cena, Cena sucks" chants. All right, this is a man who was universally hated by half of the audience and universally loved by the other half of the audience. Would that have changed had he been heel? No.
Yes. And we are witness. Hold on.
No. I'm still talking. No. Because unlike Roman Reigns, John Cena created this amazing experience for children. Roman Reigns never did. If Cena goes heel, it's like Hulk Hogan going heel, where this isn't, you are comparing the wrong person. The Cena heel turn would be closer to the Hogan heel turn, because every child would have their heart broken and would absolutely hate Cena, and the other half would love Cena. What would that stadium now sound like, Steve? It would still sound like "Let's go Cena, Cena sucks." It would be the exact same.
See,
you're talking hypotheticals. I am talking facts.
No, you're not, because you look at Roman was never the kid character, okay? But what we saw with Roman was the exact same thing. Roman Reigns as a heel comes out, the ladies and the kids liked him, the men, the grown adults who grew up like watching wrestling like me in the 90s, where wrestling was gritty and real, and this is what we lived and breathed, booed the death out of him. I'm telling you right now, Roman as heel is exactly what we would have seen if Cena went heel. Hold on, I'm not done. The kids would have grown up seeing, wow, Cena can still be over, but still be a bad guy, just like Hogan proved. In WCW, when he turned, he was hated, but he was still loved because he reinvented himself as Hollywood Hogan. And when he came back to WWE, he didn't come back with the boas. He came back as Hollywood Hulk Hogan. So now what we're seeing with Roman, John Cena, for the longest time, highest merch sales ever next to Stone Cold Steve Austin. Who's got the highest merch sales now?
For a heel.
Roman.
It's for a
Reigns.
heel.
Still, for a heel. Cena would have got Vince to go, "Get me money, make me money," and gone into an absolute different atmosphere of merch sales and drawing for the business. Cena going heel, and you also made a point about The Rock going off and making mediocre movies. 12 Rounds was trash. The Marine was trash. Trainwreck was a train wreck.
Yeah, but Steve, he was
even him in the blockbuster for Fast 9 was horrible. He was terrible.
I mean, The Rock isn't making amazing movies either. Like they're making popcorn flicks. That was not my point. My point is that The Rock left the business entirely to make those shit movies, while Cena didn't. Cena was in the business working 350 days a week, not missing a house show, coming back from an injury that would take a regular human 17 months to heal in 6.
Yeah.
And he did all of that while putting in the work in Hollywood to do those shit movies to eventually get to the point where he is now, where he's a marquee movie star, the must-have action hero, right? Cena isn't winning an Oscar. Neither is The Rock. That you twisted my point there. The point is that Cena did this while being part of the business. And what does that do for Cena now when he's a major mega superstar? Is that when you think and see John Cena, you still think wrestling first, unlike The Rock, where you think movies first, because The Rock has been in movies longer than he ever was in wrestling. Contribution outside of the business, can you agree that Cena is the greatest of all time?
Yes.
Okay. Your argument against having Cena on here is based on this mark belief that everyone needs to at some point be heel, and I disagree with that.
You twisted my words.
Did I?
You twisted my words. You can go back into the video and say, I did not say John Cena didn't belong. I said there are reasons why he shouldn't belong. Because where I was saying I was going to surprise you is I did etch John Cena into
what the fuck
Mount
are
Rushmore.
you fighting so hard on this then?
Because I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be because of all the points I just made. One being that he needed to go heel. What sold me...
But why?
Listen.
Why would he need to go heel? Why?
For making the money for the business.
He was making a shit ton as it was.
He could have made more. It wasn't... You're a businessman. Go on a good business decision. Cena going heel is best for business.
No, that is a risk. And not all risks pay off, especially when you already have something that's working. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Roman Reigns was broken. They had to fix him. Cena, as a moneymaker,
look what they did.
Amazing. And yes, calculated risks sometimes pay off, but they needed a risk with Roman. They didn't need a risk with Cena, because Cena was already the face, the movie star, the moneymaker, trying to be a movie star. He was already the top earner. Why risk that? You can risk it with Roman because he wasn't the top earner, because his character was floundering and he needed something, and they hit it out of the damn park. They absolutely hit it out of the damn park.
And we could talk about that all day long, but at the end of the day, Mike, my points to everyone else that we have talked about on this list. Yes, contribution to the business. Honestly, yes. Cena,
greatest of all time.
Next to Hunter for different reasons.
Sure.
Contribution to the business outside MTV mainstream. Yes, Cena, greatest of all time. I will give you that. We have talked about Taker, Hunter, Shawn, workers in the ring. He doesn't even come close.
I know.
Okay?
But I'm gonna throw two words at you. I'm gonna throw two words at you. And you're gonna hate this. And I think a lot of listeners are gonna hate this. Sports entertainment. Okay? All right? We can talk about amazing movesets. We can talk about all of these 5-star quality matches. But at the end of the day, who brings in the money? The entertainers, not the wrestlers. The entertainers. And we can talk about how you don't like Cena, Fruity Pebbles this, Fruity Pebbles that. But at the end of the day, for a long time, he was the only person in WWE during that terrible era, like post ECW, like that 5-year stretch. He was the only one that could get a reaction out of everyone. Let's go, Cena. Cena sucks. And
I agree. And unfortunately, with how bad that era was, we did see the floundering of some other superstars that could have been not that level, but they could have taken a little bit of the pie. Cena had 95% of the pie in that era. Like, obviously Lesnar came back here and there and took a little bit. We had Ray for a while. We had Eddie before the passing. We had Hunter and Shawn, which it was little stints.
Steve,
But Cena was a. Can I finish?
you can
It was
finish.
Cena was your staple. He was the billboard. He was everything.
Yeah.
And all I'm saying is, yes, for of the four things we're talking about, Cena only hits the mark fully on two.
Steve, you said two things here that I need to point out. All right. So you said that Cena had 95% of the pie. Okay.
Yep.
You also said that he was the face, he was the billboard. Why risk all of that for a heel turn? For what? So we can get him 90.
What the people wanted.
What if he already had 95% of the pie? What are we willing to risk that to get him 97% of the pie?
He had 95% of the marquee. He was that guy that everybody wanted to love and hate. And yes, you're correct on that. But I just think there's always going to be that asterisk on Cena that he should have gone heel. And just because he didn't want to do it, WWE wanted to do it. They wanted to put him heel, and the only reason he didn't want to do it goes back to exactly what I said. It goes back to the Make-A-Wish and him not wanting to disappoint the kids. Well, guess what, John? The kids grow up and they understand. We all grew up. We didn't want to see Hogan go heel. We didn't want to see Austin singing Kumbaya with Mr. McMahon. We didn't want to see The Rock. Well, The Rock kind of, his heel turn was kind of tarnished as well. It wasn't a success. You know, Taker with the corporate ministry. Fuck, that was horrible. We didn't want to see it, but we moved past it. If it didn't work, it doesn't work. The true fans and the kids are still going to love Cena when he goes back, because imagine it fails. And then they turn it. And Cena's back to being a face. The merchandise sales go through the roof.
So you're back to square one. His merchandise sales were already through the roof.
And they keep going.
They always did. They never stopped. They like, I just think that the Cena heel turn is this fugazi, you know, to quote Wolf of Wall Street, is this fugazi, is this fake thing that people think would have been amazing, and now they're using Roman as the example, but like it's not even close of a parallel.
But from what we implemented on how we were picking this, the only two things you're going off of is mainstream media and what he did, or his accolades being 16 time. Right? Is that am I right, or am I missing something?
No, we talked about big match John. So we're talking about somebody that, yeah, sure, didn't, like, on a nightly basis, yeah, he's not putting up the best matches, right? But when it came to main events, when it came to when the most eyes were on him, sure, okay, he was with amazing workers, but he was putting together some of the best matches. AJ Styles has been in the main roster since 2016. He's fought people. He's faced people with far more in-ring ability than John Cena, and his best match is still against John Cena. Technically, if you go back to watch it, it's still amazing, but maybe it's not his best. But the fact that John Cena brought that aura of the big match feel made that match amazing. CM Punk, same thing. Okay, there are these guys that are just known for being amazing workers, but when you put, you know, AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura, which should have been the biggest barn burner, and it sucks. But I guarantee you, my guy, if you put John Cena versus Shinsuke Nakamura, it's probably amazing. And that's just, he's one of the very unique people who can be bland in the ring and safe in the ring on free TV. And when it comes to big matches, he has some of the most memorable, iconic matches of the post-Lesnar ruthless aggression era.
Yeah. And honestly, like I said to you a little bit ago, like, I am going to put him there for the two things. I personally you mentioned a couple of matches there. I couldn't put them ahead of a lot of the matches I saw in the 90s and in the early 2000s. I couldn't put any of them there. I don't think if you gave me 10 top 10 matches, John Cena doesn't hit it one. But then again, I was blessed with before that I was blessed with what is now the forbidden phrase professional wrestling. I grew up with professional wrestling. I didn't grow up with sports entertainment. As an adult, I saw sports entertainment, and that's where I took a bit of a hiatus because it bored me. I want to see like what I saw in the 90s and in the late 90s to the early 2000s with the Monday Night Wars. Like that stuff I want to see. So that's another reason John as a fan just really doesn't do it for me. It's the 7 moves of doom, the like the late kick out for the other guys, and then it's just the sequences always felt the same. There was no real surprise to it. So yes, John does go there for what he did in carrying the business through literally the worst time in professional wrestling and sports entertainment. What he's done to bring people from the outside, yes, he gets there, but after, like I made my point before, everyone else we talked about is still in ring better for what they were as a locker room leader. Better. John was a good locker room leader, but he was that very strict, more military, kind of. It doesn't seem like John would be the guy going out for beers with the boys like you saw with Taker, but you knew when there was enough, right? And it was still more focused on the business, right? So yes, John does get his place. The only close one that I was tossing with, and you did mention earlier, was Randy, because I do think Randy gets that final title run, like you said, pushing away Rick and maybe one or two more. But I don't see Cena getting 17. I don't think there's anywhere for him to fit to get 17, and they showed that against Roman in losing that short feud. I know Cena's coming back, but I don't. It just doesn't make sense unless he goes over and takes on somebody for the WWE title like Rollins or Big E or whomever is the title holder on Raw. But going over to SmackDown and getting the Universal title, I don't see it happening because they already ended that.
Yeah,
So
and frankly, honestly, like Cena's 17th title should not be a Universal title. It should be a WWE championship.
yes,
Like that's like you don't. Cena's not synonymous with the Universal title. He is. He when you think of the champ, you think of the spinner WWE belt. You think of the
yep,
big WWE, like the current one. It needs to be the WWE championship, and like at the end of the day, like yeah, like it would be tough for him to fit that in with it, like and have a long enough feud within a hectic movie schedule. Rock did it.
yep,
Rock did it. If The Rock could do it when he's filming all those movies, Cena can definitely pull it off. But it does need to be the WWE Championship. But nonetheless, I'm happy that we're able to find a middle ground on John Cena. I do disagree with him needing to go heel for him to be this end all final like the perfect version of Cena. I think I think he was already the greatest heel in the business that there ever was. Unironically, he was the greatest heel of all time, while being the biggest face of all time, all at the same time. I mean,
And I
like,
think on my sorry, and I think on my final point with just I know you're arguing the heel turn. I think we got a glimpse of what people wanted when they did the Firefly Funhouse
oh,
match.
I thought you were gonna say One Night Stand.
No, 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 no. Firefly Funhouse. If you watched social media, if you watched Twitter, Instagram, um, all that social media of everyone really looking at the glimpse and the little hints of WWE even talking about the Cena heel turn, that is what everyone talked about. That was the talk. And that's after that's shortly before the Boneyard match. And I didn't think anything could top the Firefly Funhouse match because that was like for what they had to do and accomplish in a lockdown world, that was perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I really think, like, after, if you go back and look at what social media was saying, it's like that's what they wanted. That's what the diehards wanted from Cena. And honestly, I think it would have been a success. You don't. We've come to the middle ground. At the end of the day, I'm gonna say like Cena gets the little corner of the Rushmore, but he can be on it. And at the end of the day, I think we finally came to a very surprising conclusion.
No,
I
no,
think
I'm
that's
not done here anymore. I'm not done.
oh,
Look, listen, we got a glimpse of it and everybody loved it. Look, this is a situation where people love the idea more than probably the final result. I think just the taste of it is more than enough to satiate everybody that wanted the John Cena heel turn. I don't think that it's as good as people think that it ends up being. I just don't think that it is. I think that you said right for business. I think the right for business was to keep him the way that he was. I think that like I said, like I've mentioned numerous times, Cena was already a heel, just unironically, but we did get heel Cena, like a full heel Cena, one night stand versus RVD. We got it. And the crowd was insanely against Cena at one
that
night
wasn't a
stand.
heel Cena. That wasn't a heel Cena. That was an anti Cena. That was like an anti vaxxer. That is an anti Cena. There was no one from WWE walking into the Hammerstein Ballroom and getting cheered. Look at Big Show and Batista. The same old shit chant. Get out. They had to force Sabu to go out just to save that segment.
Yeah, but
No,
Cena.
that was an anti WWE.
Now go back and
crowd.
go back and watch that match. All right. When has Cena ever beaten up a ref? He beat up the ECW ref. Cena was playing up that crowd like no other. Right? They threw his shirt back. What does a rational person do who is a face? They put their shirt away. But no, heel Cena is playing them up. Throw it back at me. He's riling them up. That is a heel Cena sure, not
That's the
overtly.
epitome. That's the epitome of getting heat. Yes, I agree.
We'll leave it at that.
Oh no, you can't leave it on. I'll agree. End of stream. I got
he agrees.
him. No,
I win.
not a chance.
He agrees. No, I think that's a good middle ground, but I'm glad that we were able to get John Cena in there. To me, he's George Washington of the Mount Rushmore. But we'll agree to disagree. In your Mount Rushmore, he's got a little corner. Steve, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Mr. Tesh. You can find me on actually almost all social media platforms, Twitter, Mr. Tesh, and on Twitch officially as Mr. Tesh. So I stream a variety of nights a week, different games, that kind of thing. So yeah, do me a favor, hit me up on a follow. I try and chat with everyone, especially when I get the messages sent in. And yeah, I look forward to hearing everyone's reactions because I have a feeling I am maybe the heel in this one and I'm going to get some heat.
All right, buddy. You can find me over on twitch.tv at twitch.tv/SantiZap in the description of wherever it is that you're watching this, whether in video format on YouTube or in podcast services around the globe. You can find this in the description. Our Discord channel, where you can come over to the professional wrestling section, where you can leave comments and you can leave questions so that we can feature those in future episodes of the Straight Shoot a Wrestling podcast. Next week, we will be back with episode 2. I don't know if we should spoil what the topic of the show is, Steve. What do you think?
No, I think we should, Santi, because I would love to get some questions and maybe some people's suggestions on what they feel about it going through. So I really think we should share.
All right. Let the people know.
So episode 2. WWE versus AEW. Is this the new war? I want to hear from you guys. Santi wants to hear from you guys. Tell us what you think. What's WWE doing to kind of balance out what AEW is doing? Is it professional wrestling versus sports entertainment? Or have you guys seen like a change in WWE since Tony Khan and AEW has really been like rocking the boat and kind of changing the dynamic of what wrestling is these days?
All right. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like this video, leave a comment with whatever questions you'd like asked. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and tell a friend about this. We are doing a 5-episode pilot. Depending on reactions and how this thing does and how many people it engages with, we are happy to go beyond 5 episodes, but you're going to get 5 episodes for sure. But again, we need your support to make this become a regular weekly thing for the foreseeable future. So everybody, if you watch this long, thank you very much. And we will see you next week.